In a cold London morgue, Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley is dressing a corpse. He fits the pristine uniform of a Royal Marines major, an honor this anonymous man never earned in life. His body was chosen for one chilling reason: no one would ever miss him. This corpse was now a weapon aimed at Adolf Hitler. It carried a lie that could save thousands of lives. But the success of this entire operation wasn't an accident. It uncovered a fundamental flaw in the human mind, a flaw that makes you just as vulnerable today. So how did one corpse, a handful of forged letters, and a single audacious lie fool the entire German high command? And what does the success of their deception reveal about the stories you believe every single day? To understand the sheer desperation that gives birth to such a plan, you need to picture the world in the spring of 1943. Europe is a fortress. Fortress Europa, walled off by steel concrete and the fanatical devotion of the German war machine. The Allies have clawed their way across North Africa, but now they stand at the edge of the Mediterranean, staring at the continent itself. They need to get in. They need a foothold from which to launch the final bloody reconquest. The strategic planners in London and Washington have all pointed to the same place on the map: Sicily. It was the soft underbelly of the Axis, as Churchill called it, a stepping stone from Africa to Italy. But the Germans know this too. They are not fools. They anticipate the attack, and Sicily is bristling with defenses, its beaches mined, its airfields crowded with fighters, and its hills fortified. A direct assault, as planned under the code name Operation Husky, would be a massacre. The Allies would walk into a prepared kill zone, and the invasion beaches could run red with the blood of an entire generation. What they needed was not more men or more guns. They needed a miracle. They needed to make the Germans look the other way just for a moment. This is where a small, clandestine group known as the 20 Committee comes in. Operating from the shadows of British intelligence, their job was not to fight with bullets, but with deception. One of its members, the astute and imaginative naval intelligence officer Ian Montague, was given the impossible task: convince the German high command that the largest amphibious invasion in history was going to happen somewhere else entirely. If you were looking at their map, you'd see the problem immediately. Every logical alternative to Sicily was a poor one, but logic was not the weapon they intended to use. The idea itself was not entirely new. It was a twisted evolution of a concept jotted down in a 1939 memo by Rear Admiral John Godfrey, Director of Naval Intelligence, and his personal assistant, Lieutenant Commander Ian Fleming. Yes, that Ian Fleming. The memo, known as the Trout Memo, suggested planting misleading papers on a corpse to be found by the enemy. For years, it was just a morbid fantasy sitting in a file, too outlandish, too risky to ever be attempted. But by 1943, with the casualty predictions for Sicily piling up, desperation had made the unthinkable plausible. The plan, now codenamed Operation Mincemeat, began not with a bang, but with a whisper in the corridors of power. Charles Cholmondeley, the RAF officer from the Hook, and Ian Montague, the naval intelligence officer, became the architects of this grand deception. Their first and most ghoulish task was finding a body. This was not a simple matter. They couldn't use a battlefield casualty. An autopsy would reveal the true cause of death. They needed a man with no family, no one to ask questions, no one to mourn him. They needed someone whose disappearance from the world would go utterly unnoticed. And the man they brought in to help them find it was the renowned pathologist Sir Bernard Spilsbury. He was brought into the conspiracy, his job to advise them on what kind of body would work. According to historical accounts, he was brutally specific. The man must appear to have drowned at sea, but the cause of death must be something else entirely, something that would leave no obvious trace. The search was a grim, frustrating odyssey through the London morgues. If you had followed them on their search, you would have felt the crushing weight of their task. walking past row after row of the city's unclaimed dead, looking for the perfect vessel for their lie. Finally, they found him. A 34-year-old man, a homeless drifter named Glyndwr Michael, had died in a derelict warehouse after ingesting poison. The poison contained phosphorus, which was difficult to identify with the tests of the day. He had no family that could be traced. He had no friends. He was, for their purposes, perfect. He was their man. Now they had to build him a new identity, a soul from scratch. He became Acting Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. They chose the name Martin because it was a common one in the Marines. If the Germans checked, they might find other real Martins muddying the waters. But what makes this deception a work of genius isn't the official papers. It's the tiny human flaws they invented for Major Martin. They built his life piece by piece with the obsessive detail of a novelist. Montague and his team reasoned that a small, perfect lie is easily dismissed, but a large, imperfect, and deeply human lie is irresistible. Major Martin would not be a perfect hero. He would be flawed, real, and relatable. They created Pocket Litter, the mundane collection of items that tells the story of a life. They wrote him love letters from a fictitious fiancée named Pam, complete with a photograph, actually a picture of an MI5 clerk named Jean Leslie. In one letter, she gently chastises him for being careless. They included 2 ticket stubs from a London theater and a receipt for a diamond engagement ring. They even gave him an overdraft notice from Lloyd's Bank for £79, 19S.2D, a detail of such exquisite humanity that it felt more true than any official document. If you had been in that room, smelling the faint scent of the perfume they dabbed on the love letters, you would understand they were not forging documents. They were crafting a ghost. The centerpiece of the deception was a formal letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Sir Harold Alexander, containing casual but clear references to upcoming Allied attacks on Sardinia and Greece. This was the bait. To make it irresistible, Montague's team spent weeks perfecting the personal details that would make Major Martin real. And the place they chose to deliver this phantom officer was no accident. It was the one spot in Europe where they knew he would fall directly into the hands of the enemy. They kept the body on ice for 3 months, waiting for the perfect moment, the right tides, the right political climate. The body was placed in a specially designed airtight steel canister packed with dry ice labeled "Handle with care optical instruments for transport." The submarine HMS Seraph was chosen to carry this strange cargo to its destination, the coast of Huelva, in supposedly neutral Spain. They chose Huelva for a very specific reason. It was crawling with German spies and home to one of their most efficient and trusted agents, a man named Adolf Klaus. They weren't just dropping the body in the ocean, they were hand-delivering it to the enemy. The ghost they had so carefully constructed was ready to be deployed, but there was one final, chilling detail they overlooked: the real man whose body they had stolen. Let's talk about Glyndwr Michael. He was not a major. He was not a hero. He was born in Aberbargode, Wales. His father, a coal miner, took his own life when Glyndwr was a boy. He struggled for years, working odd jobs, but he was a man adrift, and eventually he ended up in London with no work, no money, and no home. He was found in an abandoned warehouse near King's Cross, dying from phosphorus poisoning after eating bread laced with rat poison, possibly in an act of desperation to end his hunger or his life. He was a man the world had thrown away. He died alone, and his body was taken to the St. Pancras morgue, destined for a pauper's grave. His only distinction in death was that he fit a very specific, very cold set of criteria for a top-secret operation. The state, in its moment of supreme peril, reached down into the lowest rungs of its society and took one of its forgotten sons. They gave his body a name he never knew, a rank he never earned, and a love he never felt. Reportedly, they were unable to locate his parents, and so permission to use the body was given by the coroner. Think about the person you trust most in the world. Now imagine that the system designed to protect you sees you only as a tool, an object to be used and discarded, your identity erased, your story rewritten to serve a purpose you would never understand. Glyndwr Michael's final act on this earth was to become a lie, his anonymity the most valuable thing he ever possessed. His real life was deemed worthless, but his death, his empty, silent vessel of a body, was priceless. His part in the story was over, but for the men who used him, the most dangerous part was just beginning. What happened next was not an accident. It was a symphony of manipulation conducted from 1,000 miles away. On April 30th, 1943, at 4:30 a.m., the submarine HMS Seraph surfaced in the dark, cold waters off the coast of Spain. The crew, who had been told the canister contained a top-secret weather device, were ordered below deck. Only the officers were present on deck as they opened the canister. Ewan Montague, in his account, describes the quiet, solemn moment as they slid the body of Major Martin into the water. They even recited the 39th Psalm over his body, "I will take heed to my ways, that I sin not with my tongue. I will keep my mouth with a bridle while the wicked is before me." They attached his briefcase containing the forged documents to his wrist. Then, they pushed a rubber dinghy into the sea nearby to suggest he was the survivor of a plane crash. The submarine slipped back beneath the waves, its mission complete. The entire operation now rested on a series of perfectly calculated probabilities. They had studied the tidal patterns to ensure the body would wash ashore exactly where they wanted it to. A local fisherman found the body hours later, just as they predicted. But this is where the terrifying coordination of the plan becomes clear. This wasn't just about dropping a body and hoping for the best. The British had a network of agents and diplomats already in motion. The British vice consul in Huelva began sending a flurry of increasingly frantic and coded diplomatic cables back to London, demanding the return of the briefcase found on the Major's body. They made it clear, through these channels they knew the Germans were reading, that the contents were of the utmost importance. They deliberately created a sense of panic and urgency, knowing it would signal to the Germans that the documents were genuine and vital. This wasn't a random event. It was a meticulously staged piece of theater, and the entire Spanish coast was their stage. And here is where you should feel a chill. This level of control, this manipulation of reality on a global scale, did not end in 1943. It was a blueprint. The operation involved not just military planners, but meteorologists, pathologists, forgers, submariners, diplomats, and double agents, all working in concert to execute a single, perfect lie. But none of this explains the single terrifying message they received that confirmed the Germans hadn't just seen the bait, they had swallowed it whole. The message arrived in London via an ultra-intercept, the highest level of Allied intelligence, a direct decryption of German high command communications. It was a short, simple cable, and according to some historical accounts, it read, "Mincemeat swallowed rod, line, and sinker. The bait had been taken." In Spain, the documents had passed from the Spanish authorities directly into the hands of Adolf Klaus, the local Abwehr chief. He immediately understood their potential significance. The papers were sent by courier to Berlin, where they landed on the desk of the top intelligence analysts of the Third Reich. They were examined for water damage, for the type of ink used, for the quality of the paper. German forensics were excellent, but the documents were perfect forgeries designed to pass just this kind of scrutiny. The love letters, the bank overdraft, the personal touches. They convinced the analysts that Major Martin was a real and slightly careless staff officer. But the analysts were not the real target. The lie had one specific audience. The information was passed up the chain of command, finally reaching the Wolf's Lair in Rastenburg and the desk of Adolf Hitler himself. And here is the systemic truth you must understand. This wasn't about a single piece of brilliant intelligence. It was about confirming a bias Hitler already held. What you now understand, and what most people never will, is that the most successful deceptions don't introduce a new idea. They simply validate a foolish one that is already there. Hitler had long been paranoid about an Allied invasion of the Balkans, particularly Greece, fearing the loss of the Romanian oil fields which were critical to his war machine. The documents found on Major Martin didn't create this fear. They nourished it. They were the piece of evidence his intuition had been screaming for. He seized on the information with fanatical conviction. Against the advice of some of his own generals, Hitler became the deception's most powerful advocate, and the orders he gave next would doom many of his own men. He ordered the 1st Panzer Division to be moved from France to Greece to counter the Phantom invasion. He sent 2 more Panzer Divisions to Sardinia. He dispatched German torpedo boats from Sicily to the Greek islands. He stripped the defenses of the one place the Allies were actually going to attack. The ruse had worked beyond the wildest dreams of its creators. The lie had become truth in the mind of the one man who mattered most. This is the enduring lesson of Operation Mincemeat. Power does not make you immune to deception. In fact, it makes you more vulnerable because it insulates you in a world of your own making, where you hear only the things you want to hear. The real horror isn't that a dictator was fooled. It's the recognition that the mechanism that fooled him is a fundamental part of human psychology that exists in every boardroom, every government, and every online argument today. So we return to the questions that have been sitting with you this entire time. How did one dead man change the world? And why do we so easily fall for a well-told lie? The answer you've been waiting for is that the greatest weapon of war isn't a bomb. It's a story. The Germans were not defeated by a forged document. They were defeated by a character. Major William Martin, with his loving fiancée Pam, his money troubles, and his slightly rumpled uniform, was more real to the German intelligence analysts than the cold, hard, strategic reality that Sicily was the only logical target. They believed in him. Humans are not creatures of logic. We are creatures of narrative. A story with a relatable character and emotional stakes will often be more persuasive than a list of facts. The lie worked because it was personal, messy, and human. The truth, a massive, coordinated military invasion, was abstract and impersonal. They chose to believe the story. And the deeper answer, the one that implicates us all, is that we believe what we want to believe. The lie on that corpse confirmed Hitler's deepest strategic fears. It told him he was right all along. And there is no lie more seductive than the one that confirms our own genius. For more than 50 years, the body in the cemetery in Huelva lay under a tombstone that read, William Martin. The lie outlived the war, the Third Reich, and most of the men who invented it. It wasn't until 1998 that the British government formally identified Michael, and a new inscription was added to the grave, honoring the real man who had given his life and his identity, Glyndwr Michael. We are back in the cold London morgue. The room is still, the air thick with the smell of chemicals. A man is dressing a corpse in a uniform it never earned, preparing it for a destiny it could never comprehend. That single, quiet, monstrous act set in motion a chain of events that saved thousands of lives and shortened one of the deadliest wars in human history. The principle behind that act, creating a believable fiction with small human details, is not a relic of the past. You see it every day. You see it in the curated perfection of a social media profile, in the political ads that tell a simple, emotional story instead of a complex truth, in the conspiracy theories that thrive on personal anecdotes instead of verifiable data. The lie of Major Martin required forged letters and a submarine. Today, the same deception can be achieved with a keyboard and an internet connection. The next time you see a story that feels perfectly, emotionally true, the one that confirms everything you already suspected about the world, ask yourself who wrote it. Ask yourself if you are the target of the deception or simply the weapon being used to spread it. Subscribe. because the truth is always more complex than the stories we are told.